If you, like me, are a longtime fan of cursed conlangs, then you'll remember this map from the renowned documentary on the Goptjaam language, showing the progression of Chinese influence to the Low Countries. But what Kat Mistberg did not mention was that this was actually a return to form. For you see, long before the Tang tendril stretched its way across Eurasia, Chinese scholars visited the European subcontinent, dazzling the locals with their advanced culture. And nowhere is their influence clearer than on the island of Yodean. Yodean is a West Germanic language, part of the Germanic branch of the famous Indo-European family. Despite its lineage, it has a higher than average proportion of Sinitic vocabulary. Though somewhat straightforward to speak, its written form is infamously complicated, characterized by patchwork changes to a mixed spelling system dating back over 1,500 years. You may wonder how such a bizarre language arose, and, well, remember the Turkish ice cream merchants from the Dondurmaca and Concord showcases? Yeah, they actually have nothing to do with Yodean. It was actually the work of Attila, the Han. Contrary to popular belief, Attila was not in fact the mighty Hun who ransacked Asia Minor just for fun, but an enlightened scholar sent from China. The popular view of him is just a myth perpetuated by Renaissance-era historians who were embarrassed at being out-cultured by pagans. As the Western Roman Empire buckled in the 5th century, he toured the chaotic continent with the express goal of flexing on the rest of the known world over a millennium before the Ming had the same idea. It's not clear if he himself ever reached Northern Europe, but if not, then some of his associates did, and the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes ate that shit up, to use the technical parlance. Over the course of about 75 years, they adopted as many Chinese customs as they feasibly could, and when direct contact with the Han faded around 500 AD, they took all they had learned with them across the North Sea to settle the island known as Yodean. There, partially insulated from the cultural developments of the continent, they entrenched themselves as a dominant culture until the Norman conquest of 1066. By then, Anglo-Han writing had become sacred, and with successive Yodean emperors bending over backwards to continue its usage, it survived into the 21st century. But before we lose ourselves in the orthography, we must first discuss the other properties of the Yodean language. Particularly, we will compare it to a similar curse slang known as, well, English. Yodean's phonology is almost the same as that of English, which top scholars believe is due to them evolving from more or less the same proto-language and having almost the same set of sound changes in the same order. The most notable difference is phonemic creaky voice in Yodean, which emerged from the glottalization of T between vowels. For example, the Yodean cognate with the English word water is pronounced war. Other iconic sound laws are also here, including the great vowel shifts. You may or may not have heard that right. Shifts. Unlike English, Yodean applied this change twice, and also skipped that stupid-ass merger of and from the early modern period. These vowels are still distinguished in orthography. If you're lucky, that is. Speaking of orthography, Yodean is written in an unforgivable mixture of Han logographs and Anglo-Saxon rains. Yes, that's how it's pronounced thanks to double great vowel shift. The rains are an alphabet, but I don't know if I can legally call them phonetic, since some, like Perth, always have the same reading rules, while the vowel rains may have up to 4 largely unpredictable readings depending on if and when their lengths ever changed. Speaking of historical spelling and, by extension, orthographic horrors, Han logographs form the backbone of Yodean writing. Since contact between the early Anglo-Saxons and the Han scholars was fairly brief, there was only time to borrow one pronunciation per character. Take, for example, the Yodean name for these characters. The first character was pronounced Han and remains recognizable as Han in modern Yodean. The second character, pronounced Z in Middle Chinese, was borrowed as Z in early Anglo-Saxon, and is now pronounced Rai. Thus, as expected, the pronunciation of the compound word of Han and Rai is just kidding, it's Hender, because the word was borrowed 1500 years ago and evolved as a single unit originally pronounced Hanzi, rather than each component evolving separately. Again, because direct loans from Sinitic stopped by 500 AD, this happens all the time. Do you think if I scream into the void, it'll answer in Yodean? Okay, so I found this void here on my bed.
Hey! And tune moving!
Holy shit, it does respond in Yodean. Oh, but don't worry, not every Yodean word written in Hender uses a bastardized Sino-Anglic pronunciation. Some Hender have Anglo-Saxon readings, Norse readings, French readings, or even occasional Celtic readings depending on context. How do you tell which reading to use? If you're lucky, you can tell from the register you're speaking in. Yodean has 3 major speech registers, also known as the CCC system, depending on the relationship between the speaker and the listener. The common register emphasizes Germanic words and is used in informal situations. The clerical register uses Sinitic vocabulary and is the most formal. The cowardly register uses words from French and is often used for derision. The cowardly register dates back to the days of Norman control over Yodi. Local peasants and nobles both learned to fear their French overlords and used French words to appease them. As such, speaking French as a Yodean became a sign of cowardice and capitulation to foreign rule, even as French influence faded and native nobles began to reassert themselves. Describing someone with words of French origin became a way to deride them as cowardly, later evolving into the derisive register of today. What stays the same across registers is morphosyntax. In this respect, Yodean is slightly more conservative than modern English, retaining oblique and genitive case markings for nouns and person marking for verbs. Oh fuck, I just mentioned verbs while talking about a Germanic language. That means it's time to die. A well-known fact about Germanic verbs is that there are 2 major flavors: strong verbs, which mark past tense by changing the root vowel, and weak verbs, which mark it with a suffix like a sane person. Yodean, like English, has retained this system, but since stems are written with logographic Hender, you may be asking, how is tense marked for strong verbs? What's the secret, Georgina? Well, whoever Georgina is, she will not save you from the answer, which is that all verbs written in Hender use the rune de as a past tense marker. For weak verbs, it's pronounced d as expected, but on strong verbs, it's a silent letter that marks ablaut. See the conjugation chart for the verb stylen as an example. Despite the corresponding rain, the D phoneme is nowhere to be seen, while verb forms that use the rain have a different root vowel than those that don't. Syntax is very similar to English. Adjectives precede head nouns and possessors precede possessees, but prepositions are used instead of postpositions. The key difference is a little thing called hyper-V2 word order. Except when giving a command, the second word of each clause is its finite verb if it has one. Emphasis on second word, not second constituent. In fact, hyper-V2 word order can lead to heads being separated from their modifiers, albeit not to the same extent as dondermaja. If English used this word order, then the tall girl bought an apple would be rendered as the bought tall girl an apple. And Lyndon Baines Johnson had one job but he still screwed it up would be Lyndon had Baines Johnson one job but screwed he still it up. An example of this construction in Yodean is the question, "Ni made stoften in tiongwakunen?" The finite verb, which is also the question auxiliary, is not just the second word in the sentence, but it also breaks up the proper name at the very start. Armed with this knowledge, you can finally face the sample text without utterly dying. On the off chance, of course, that you haven't died already. Yo, and that's all I translated. Apart from the rest of it, of course, which goes like this. Yo is un yunjai te. Tinglot shall not noderen te mungs laumrai stikken, noderen tau mewing speng and sinsangs with bonen. Oh, mon dieu! Ilan femmen me scheiden an ilan reischar. Krok sind reis quedi blot pikend. Reis both buns elsewhere sind reislex. Reis immert sio elsewhere the mung thwained. If you're still breathing after all that, then please like, subscribe, share, and vote for Yodean when CCC4's voting opens. In the meantime, Arnifnaf have ya been, and kontranening for ning and chaining.